My name's David Roylance, and I was born in the USA, in Washington, D.C., and I teach here at Wat Thong Yu in Chiang Mai, Thailand, and I also travel around and teach in other places as well. And I help people to understand the path to enlightenment as taught by the Buddha.
Awesome. First question I got for you is, why are you doing all of this for free?
Because in order for the entire world to be able to get access to the teachings, it needs to be done at no cost so that anybody and everybody can get access to the teachings. And if I put a price tag on the things that I do, then it blocks out a certain group of disadvantaged beings. And those beings, we might say, actually need the teachings the most because they're the ones struggling in the world the most. So if my books, if my classes, if everything had a price tag on it, those people that were less fortunate wouldn't be able to access those resources, and now they're stuck in the situation that they're in. Additionally, if I'm working with a student and a student is needing to take multiple courses multiple times, which is typically the case, you're not going to just learn one time in a course and get everything. And I recommend to you to study the course 2 times, 3 times, 4 times, whatever it might be. If it's got a price tag on it, then you can't tell what is the incentive here. Is David just trying to get me to buy some more courses or what? So by not having a price, when I say, I really recommend you take this course 2 times or 3 times, then you understand where that's coming from, is a place of interest in seeing you succeed. And then what encompasses all of this is a mind of loving kindness and a mind of compassion. The loving kindness is a genuine interest in seeing all beings be well. And then the compassion is the concern for the misfortune of others. So that's what's in the mind motivating these decisions. But then I just gave you the details of that.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you so much for that. When did you begin this path?
You know, some people might say you've been on the path for your entire life or multiple lives. I didn't know there was anything called a Buddha until probably 2001, 2002. Is when I even knew there was such thing as a Buddha, when I was preparing to come here for the first time. But looking back at my life, you know, I really was learning things all the way through my life that we could say are the teachings of the Buddha. Like my grandmother was teaching me things like, if you don't have anything good to say, don't say anything at all. Yeah. Right? This is in line with what the Buddha taught. So the Buddha's teachings, because they're natural laws, different people have tapped into them in different ways and described them in different ways. So that's grandma's way of saying it, where the Buddha was much more detailed, which is what you need to be able to know. So I think of it as I've been on this path for multiple years and multiple lifetimes, but really I didn't know that there was anything called a Buddha until 2001, 2002. I started dabbling with these teachings around that time. It wasn't until 2018 that I truly started to understand. And at that time I would have said, yeah, I'm on the path to enlightenment, or so forth and so on.
Yeah, just on that. So you said around 2018, you felt like you were on the path to enlightenment. Did you know you'd reached enlightenment at a certain point? Was there a certain feeling you had, or a presence, or an energy?
So an individual who's enlightened, they wouldn't say they were enlightened, because if you say you're enlightened, that's coming from your ego, an interest to boast and be arrogant and prideful. And an individual who's gotten to enlightenment, they don't have that in their mind. And also, they're not going to say they're not enlightened because they would be lying, right? So in my opinion, an enlightened being would be more interested in helping other people to understand what enlightenment is, rather than talk about their own attainment of enlightenment, because then it helps them to be able to understand what enlightenment is, and then they can attain it. But getting to enlightenment isn't an instantaneous thing. It's not like 1 second ago you were unenlightened, or 1 minute ago you're unenlightened, and then the next minute you're enlightened. It's gradual training, gradual practice, and gradual progress. If you were keeping track of every single time you were discontent, and you could track to the very last time you were ever experiencing any little minor discontentedness, and then it's been 1 year, 2 years, 3 years since that moment, we could say, okay, that's when you attained enlightenment, but nobody's keeping track of it that way, because you'll go 3 months, 4 months, 6 months without any discontentedness whatsoever, and then you have like a little bit of ickiness as you're in that third stage of enlightenment, before the mind's actually enlightened. You'll have a little bit of ickiness, and then it'll be another 3 months, 4 months, 6 months, maybe a year, right? And then eventually you'll get to the point where it's 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, you haven't had any discontentedness, and you'll know your mind is enlightened, but you're not really ever interested in convincing yourself of that. Because what can happen if you convince yourself you're enlightened is that your ego can arise, which conceitful, arrogant, and prideful. And in that case, you're not enlightened. Or you could become complacent and not looking over your mind and watching over your mind if you convince yourself you're enlightened.
Yeah.
And then again, you're not enlightened if that's the case. So the better thing to do is just never convince yourself you're enlightened. Maintain the practice, because as an enlightened being, you will maintain the practice for the rest of your life. It's effortless by that point. But just, it's kind of like the game Whack-A-Mole. Do you know that game?
Yeah.
Whereas if the moles are popping up and you convince yourself game's over, you're just standing there with the mallet, holding down towards the ground. Well, now when that mole comes up, you don't see it and you don't whack it. It's too late, right? So you would like to be vigilant with the mallet, so that way when all the things are coming up, you can pop each one of them, right? So like that's the pollutions of the mind. When you see them rise up, you would like to pop them, right? And then stand there eagerly with your mallet, even when the game is over and it looks like there's no more moles popping up. Right. You would like to just confirm for a good long period of time that there's no moles coming up before you put your mallet down, right? So you would like to have 1 year, 2 years, 3 years of no discontentedness, not even the slightest ickiness in the mind, and then you'll know your mind is enlightened.
Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, so it's like even though you might think you've reached it, you're still like vigilant in what you do every day to keep your state of mind. Yeah,
and by the time you get to enlightenment, you don't need to do anything to keep your mind in that state. That it's effortless to practice the teachings. It's almost like your operating system has been upgraded, where you just operate through that mental state all the time, and your mind is just always bright, cheerful, radiant, glad, uplifted. One of the biggest misunderstandings about enlightenment is some people think that an enlightened being still experiences anger or sadness or frustration or irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, loneliness, boredom, shyness, resentment, jealousy, but they don't experience any of those feelings. The causes and conditions that are producing have been uprooted. A lot of times what you'll hear is that people think that you, as an enlightened being, still experience those, but you just don't react through them.
Right.
But this isn't actually true. You just don't experience them any longer. And your mind is just always bright and cheerful and uplifted all the time.
Yeah. See, to someone who doesn't practice or hasn't been through what you've said, it seems like a very alien concept, because we're bombarded with negative things all the time. So yeah, it's very interesting to me. Yeah, people can't imagine that there's something like this out there. Yeah. And one of the ways that I describe it is it's just like a lizard or a snake. They evolve as a species. Human beings can evolve as a species as well, right? That we can evolve to this higher consciousness where we no longer experience discontent feelings. But an individual just needs to understand the wisdom of how to accomplish that. That's awesome. The only thing, is that the mind in the unenlightened state just lacks wisdom. That's it. Okay. Yeah, I understand that completely. One of your classes I took last week, there was some really good questions. One chap raised his hand and he said that in theory, he agrees with what you said about essentially separating a person from their actions. So you've got a person who's doing something bad, and in your state of mind, even if they're doing something bad, you can still want the best for them and you can still love them. In theory, it makes sense, but in practice, it's very, very difficult to do. Could you give me like a real world example where something in your past has happened, or someone's done something wrong to you, and in the past you might have reacted a certain way, but today you react with an enlightened state of mind? Sure. So by the time you get to enlightenment, yes, you can see that a person's choices and decisions are separate from the person themselves, that you can love the person, meaning have a genuine interest in seeing them be well, while still disagreeing with their choices and decisions, because you understand impermanence, and not everybody's going to make the same decisions in the same way. Even two enlightened beings, they could look at the same situation and they'll make decisions differently. 10 enlightened beings, they can make decisions differently. So an individual who's making a decision, it's important that you don't view it as right or wrong, because that's the way that the unenlightened mind will tend to do it, is they will look at each thing in the world as black and white, right and wrong. And this is thinking in absolutes, and the world is not based in absolutes. There's, in reality, multiple right answers to handle any one particular challenge,
and there's multiple quote unquote wrong answers, even though I don't think about it in right and wrong. But the one thing that you would be unwise to do in any given situation, but the mind has a hard time to do it in the unenlightened state, is to be angry and frustrated. So an example, I'll give you one that I was just talking with a student. He had an accountant who didn't file his tax form for his company. And he was communicating with the accountant and asking the accountant to handle this and to take care of it. And the accountant sent him the form with it all filled out, and he reviewed it. And he wrote back to the accountant and he said, oh, there's a couple data points here that aren't accurate. I would like you to change this, that, and that. And he got a message back from the accountant saying, I already submitted it. It's too late. Don't worry about it. Those are minor issues. And by the way, I can't be your accountant anymore. I don't want to be your accountant. So the initial instinct of this student was to fire an email back and be harsh and hostile and bitter, call to some reporting agency for accountants and complain about this person, write Google reviews and all these kinds of things. And he was seeking guidance from me about how would you suggest that I handle this. So I counseled him and gave him different options. I never tell a student what they should or shouldn't do, but I gave him some different options to consider. But that's an example of what an unenlightened mind will do, right? Is it wants to react, because in that situation, the mind is craving permanence. And one of the comments that this individual said is, what do you mean you're breaking up with me? I was going to break up with you, where he was going to fire the accountant. It's like, who are you to fire me? So this is the ego that's doing that, right? Where instead, when he shared with me what happened, I was like, oh, perfect. You don't have to break up with this person. They're doing it for you. Their mind is already let go and moving on, and now you can move on. So the mind's going to want to react, and it's going to want to cause harm to the other person, because the mind's not getting what it wants, and it experiences painful feelings, and then it wants to inflict pain back. Where instead, what you're looking to do in the situation where you see that somebody's not making decisions wisely, that they first didn't file it, then they filed it without your approval, right? Is you would like to move on from the relationship and get a new accountant, and you would like to do that as smooth and easily as possible. So an individual could look at this in many different ways, and it doesn't mean you don't complain. It doesn't mean that you don't file a report or something like this, but you need to look at those things closely to see how it's being done and whether or not there's going to be any negative consequences for you and any unwholesome results for you. So what I advised him to do is, this had just happened within 2 or 3 hours of him talking to me. I suggested to him to step back, to let his mind come down, think it over through the weekend, and then next week, consider maybe writing back to this person and responding at that point after the mind is already calm. Because when you're reacting out of anger and hostility, it's going to be an unwise decision. Where instead you can respond to the situation in a more thoughtful way. So you can get to the point where you can love this accountant. You can disagree with his choices and decisions, like, hey, he should have filed the form, or it would have been wise for him to get my approval before he submitted it. But I can separate those choices and decisions from the person, where I can disagree with how he made those decisions, but I can still love him, meaning I have a genuine interest in seeing him be well. And sometimes part of someone being well is you need to report them to a certain reporting agency in order for them to experience the results of their decisions. But even when you do that, you need to still do it through wise speech or wise communication, where you're not degrading and diminishing this person, but you're wording it in a positive way that is supportive and uplifting and providing this individual the guidance they need, should they choose to receive that from the reporting agency, to improve what they're doing.
And interestingly, what you've said there, is that you think that it's possible he should still report him. It will teach him a lesson, but he will grow from it. So even if he does get in trouble, he gets fined or whatever it is, it might end up as a net positive, basically.
Right. That's one of the things that people also have misunderstandings about with the teachings of the Buddha. They think that an individual is passive.
Yes.
Right? That you just kind of accept whatever's happening and you just kind of float through life.
One of my next questions.
Yeah, it's not that. It's that you can make decisions like this, but you would like to do it wisely based in wholesome qualities rather than your anger and frustration. Because that's what this person wanted to do, is run out right away and start damaging this person. But that's coming from their own craving, anger, and what we call ignorance, where you would like to do it based in generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom. And one of the best things to help with that is to put some space between the incident and then however you respond to it. That's one of the best ways to allow the mind to ensure that it's functioning through wholesome qualities. I would normally use an example from my own life, but it's been so long since I've been angry at somebody that I can't think of an example of something like this.
That's a good thing.
Yeah, I'll need to think about it and see if I can come up with one.
On the word passive, because you said that people, there's this thought that Buddhists are passive kind of people. I had another question about that. I think maybe you gave the example, if someone is hurting an animal, and I think you said you would remove yourself from the situation. But is that sort of the only way of dealing with that situation? Or would you, let's say you have the opportunity to stop someone, is that something where you let them get on with it and a karma deals with them? Or having the option to step in, even if it does get physical, is that something you would ever consider?
Yeah, you need to ensure you're not reacting in a situation, but instead you're responding.
Right.
Because when you're reacting, you're usually reacting out of emotion and feelings and those kinds of things. And an enlightened being doesn't have that. They're not reacting because they don't have those conditioned feelings. They're going to respond. And a response can be to step in. But see, as a teacher and helping students move to this higher consciousness, what we're teaching you to do is to understand that the Buddhist teachings aren't a decision tree, that if this happens, do that. And if this happens, do that. Because that's like a permanent answer for every situation. And that's not the case. It's black and white, right? Where you've got to move to this higher consciousness, think through the variables, and then decide what's wise, right? Because there are situations where you might potentially step in. And you can do that safely and it will result in wholesome outcomes or wholesome karma. But there are other situations where, describing the same situation, it might not be wise for you to step in. Because the first being you need to practice loving kindness and compassion for is yourself. And if there's 10 people standing there with knives and guns, what are you going to do, right? It might be better for you to help that being who's being affected by those people to go get help. Right. And that could be a better way to handle that. Or there could be another situation where it's one person and you're quite big and you're quite strong and maybe now you can step in. Right. But if I gave one answer that you should always step in, well, what about that 12-year-old kid that's like this tall and is very small, and now there's a 50-year-old man or female who's, doing something unwise, right? So you're not always looking at how to cause harm, right? Because you're not interested in causing harm, but you would like to help in this situation. And one of the best things you might be able to do is just go get help. And because there's so many variables of who the players are, what the situation is, what do they have, who are you, what do you have available to you. But you shouldn't ever burden yourself with the obligation that if this happens, I have to step in. Because now you could be making a very unwise decision. These natural laws, they don't function that way. You need to look at all the variables. And this is why the Buddha is teaching you to keep your mind calm with equanimity, because then you can think through those variables. Whereas if your mind is shaken up with anger and frustration, you're not going to be able to see clearly of the wise decisions to implement here to bring this to a wholesome result.
Yeah, no, that answers my question very well, actually. Yeah, perfect. Sex in Buddhism. So you gave the analogy last time I was here that the sex is a bit like a chocolate cake. So you can enjoy it, but you shouldn't crave it. Can you elaborate on sex in Buddhism and your general outlook on it?
Yeah, I think you might have misunderstood a little bit.
Possibly.
So sex is not immoral. It's not quote unquote bad. Right? There's nothing wrong with sex. It's an activity that people enjoy, but it is based in craving, desire, attachment. That there's a craving for pleasure. There's a craving for intimacy. There's a craving for touch and all these other things. And as long as the mind has a craving for sex, you will never get to permanent peace and permanent joy. Because there'll be situations where you want sex and you get it and you feel good about that. But there'll be some situations where you want sex and you can't get it. And now you'll be agitated and frustrated. Or there'll be situations where you want sex and you get it and it's not as fulfilling as you wanted it to be. And you're still agitated and you're still frustrated, right? So as long as there's a desire for sex, you'll never get to permanent peace and permanent joy. But you can get to the second stage of enlightenment, where you're still having a sexual relationship, and you can be doing all the other work on the path to enlightenment, and you'll have a pretty peaceful life. I mean, you're still gonna have agitation and frustration around sex, but you could be doing all the other work. And then at some point, when people get to a point where they're ready to move past that, they can make that choice, because it's a personal choice for yourself, because it's your own journey to enlightenment. It's nobody else telling you what you should or shouldn't do. We're just explaining the path to you, and then you decide how far you would like to walk and when you would like to walk on that path. So sex is one of the rare things that, as long as you have a desire for it, as long as you are doing it, you aren't going to be able to get to the peace and joy. Chocolate cake is something that someone could have a craving for it, and when they go get their chocolate cake, they're really happy. And when they show up to the restaurant and they don't have their chocolate cake, they're angry and frustrated. That's because of the craving, desire, attachment. And now you can get to a point where you eliminate your craving for chocolate cake, and whether you have chocolate cake or not, you're actually fine. And now you can actually experience where you can eat the chocolate cake, but you don't have conditioned feelings. You can't have sex and not have conditioned feelings. You will have conditioned feelings. So a piece of chocolate cake is something that you can distance yourself from for a period of time, train your mind to let it go, and then ultimately over time, you can start eating that piece of chocolate cake again, and you can do it without conditioned pleasant feelings. But sex isn't that way. Sex, unfortunately, if you step away from it, you can get to the point where you're quite calm and peaceful without it. But if you start having sex again, there's still a craving there. You still want it. And now you get those conditioned pleasant feelings. It's impossible to continue to maintain a sexual relationship without conditioned feelings and without a craving. It's one of the few things like that. But there's other things like that, like substances, like cocaine, heroin, crystal methamphetamine, alcohol. You can't ingest that and not have a craving. You know, so there are other things like that, but it's this piece of chocolate cake that I can describe to you. But you can't imagine in the unenlightened state doing something and enjoying it while not having conditioned pleasant feelings. Because in the unenlightened state, if you're having a piece of chocolate cake and you have pleasant feelings from it, now you will say, I enjoy it. Where what you need to be able to see, and you won't see it until later in your development on the path, is where you can partake in something and there's not conditioned pleasant feelings, but you can thoroughly enjoy that thing. And that comes through experience. That's why the Buddha teaches you that direct experience is what's going to help give you the insight and the wisdom to be able to understand. The best thing I can use to help you understand this, you've probably experienced this. Have you ever been anywhere where you sat on a bench and maybe you're looking at a landscape and you're like, oh my gosh, this is so enjoyable. I could sit here and do nothing the rest of the day and be completely content.
Maybe for a few hours, not for a day.
Right, but even if it was for 5 minutes, you had that moment where you're like, wow, I'm completely content in the present moment. I don't need anything outside of myself for satisfaction. I'm just fully content in the present moment.
Possibly,
Okay. So if you've ever had that experience, that's what it's like when you're eating a piece of chocolate cake and you know, wow, this tastes really good. But the mind has been trained to the point where you understand, and the mind is incapable of now experiencing conditional happiness, where only if I have the chocolate cake, I will be happy. And if I don't have the chocolate cake, I will be unhappy. That's what the unenlightened mind experiences. But by the time you get to enlightenment, you can be eating the chocolate cake and you can be thoroughly enjoying it, but your mind was already happy before you ever started eating the chocolate cake. There's no condition that's producing the happiness. So there's nothing that can take the happiness away. So whether you have the chocolate cake or you don't, you can still maintain your happiness. And unfortunately, sex is not that way.
That's the bit I'm struggling to understand. Why it's not that way? Is that because there's a partner involved as well, or is that because the feelings are stronger than just a piece of chocolate cake? It's
because the ultimate goal of sex is essentially, even though we call it making love, we're stimulating each other's senses.
Yeah.
The eyes, ears, nose, the tongue, the body, and then the mind itself. And the ultimate goal of this activity, if we're doing it well, is to get to orgasm.
Correct.
That's where the pleasant feelings are experienced, because the stimulation has become so intense that now, boom, there's an orgasm, that the mind and the body functions with that. That's the goal. Conditioned pleasant feelings. That's what you're working towards. With this piece of chocolate cake, it's not that. That's not the ultimate goal of eating a piece of chocolate cake.
Okay, yeah, I'm starting to understand it more now. Yeah. I think I'll watch it back a couple of times as well, and let it sink in.
Yeah. What I share with people is I say, if there was a way to get to enlightenment while still having sex, I would have discovered that.
Yeah.
And I'd be pleased to report that to everyone. Absolutely. But unfortunately, there's not.
Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah. Okay, awesome. For people that are very new to Buddhism, can you give a very brief outline of what it is?
What it is it's a way of life, of growing and developing to cultivate wisdom, to be able to understand the world around you so that now you can navigate the world peacefully. It's to heal from what hurt you so that you never need to hurt ever again. But what's hurting you is not the outside world, it's the inner world. And now by healing that and fixing that, you will now be able to experience the world in a peaceful and joyful way. Because when you're experiencing anger and stress and anxiety and all these other feelings, that's the mind struggling and having difficulties living in a world that it doesn't understand. So the Buddha is teaching you how to understand the world and these natural laws so that now you can navigate it peacefully.
Awesome. And finally, what do you think the world can look like if there are far more enlightened beings?
Oh, it would be more and more peaceful. There would be no such thing as famine. There would be no such thing as poverty, because people would be willing to share and practice generosity. There wouldn't be ego involved in hoarding resources and stacking up a bank account and look how much money I have. Instead, it's like, how can I be sitting on all this money when there's people out here that don't even have food to eat, right? So there'd be elimination of famine and poverty, or diseases would more and more be eradicated because we would use those resources in order to figure out how to eradicate diseases. There wouldn't be as much interaction between human and animal world, because that's where a lot of these diseases and viruses are coming from, like COVID. They're jumping in to the human world from the animal world. So whether people choose to have pets or not, that's a choice for them to make. But more and more, we would be respectful of all beings. We would be loving and kind of all beings. We would be polite amongst all beings. We would be more than willing to help our neighbors and live a peaceful and joyful life while we're sharing and helping each other and not basing our decisions in selfishness.
Yeah.
This is a lot of what we see today. We would have more loving kindness for ourselves, where people wouldn't be using drugs and alcohol, because that's having ill will towards yourself. And we would see a lot of the difficulties and struggles in the world slowly disappearing, like war. Even if everybody was enlightened in the world, there wouldn't even be a use for a military, because we wouldn't be fighting and arguing over whose border is where. We would just all share, and we would just be understanding that, hey, let's just share this land. We wouldn't be hoarding resources and things of this nature, where we wouldn't be fearful that another country was going to attack us, because we're all functioning with loving kindness and we can't imagine attacking another person. So there'd be so many benefits, because there's so many resources right now, just in military and arms and weaponry and things like this, where we could use those resources to help people that are in poverty and famine and having difficulties in the world. Those who have wealth and are easily able to acquire wealth would be able to be interested in seeing other people benefit from that, rather than like somebody coming in and distributing the wealth. It's the people who are able to acquire wealth, and these people over here are not. Now we might think that, well, let us help them learn how to acquire wealth. So it's not just me, 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 me. So, my teachings that I share from the Buddha are not to change the world. It is to help people understand the world. And through understanding the world, then they will make wise decisions how to harmoniously exist with each other.
Awesome. Yeah. Cool. Thank you so much for letting me talk to you today. Do you want to, cop and cup, do you want to promote your website or the temple or anything?
If people would like to reach out to learn, they can go to buddhadailywisdom.com. That's where all of our resources are. That's a central hub. It's all available at no cost. And then from there, they can get access to everything and anything.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah, pretty welcome.